very exciting. And we're going to be talking with the Solar and Energy Loan Fund and all that they have to offer to help facilitate that transition. It's been an interesting week with some good news. Worldwide, renewables produced more electricity than coal during the first half of the year for the first time ever. Clean energy has more than doubled its share of global electricity just over the last 4 years. So I'm Susan Glickman. I'm the Vice President for Policy and Partnerships with the Clio Institute, and I've been working on climate and energy issues for 26 years now. And what's really exciting and really underpins the conversation we're having today is that we can talk about opportunities today that we couldn't have talked about perhaps even 5 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. So I'm going to bring Mitch into this conversation in a minute, but I wanted to set the stage, particularly about self. Initially, Doug Coward was going to be joining us, and he had a family emergency that he needed to attend to. But I happened to be sort of there at the very beginning. And Doug Coward was a county commissioner in St. Lucie County. And at the time, and this is 20 years ago, there were numerous proposals to build coal-fired power plants in Florida. And one of those proposals was in St. Lucie County, where Florida Power and Light was going to build a 1,980 megawatt coal plant. At the time, Florida was 48% reliant on gas in the state. Jeb Bush was our governor, and there was a big summit about how do we address this need to have fuel diversity? Now in Florida, we're about 75% reliant on fossil gas. So in 2005, we were 48%, and now we're 75% reliant. So we worked to essentially stop that plant from going forward, which we did. And also the other proposals that were on the table. There was one with JEA, the Jacksonville's Utility, the City of Tallahassee, Florida Municipal Power Agency, and Disney, and that got canceled as well. When the proposal was voted down in St. Lucie County, where they were trying to do a zoning change to accommodate this plant, FPL did move that proposal over to Glades County, which is very rural in the state, and ultimately that proposal failed as well. So we did not add coal at the time. So it's a good thing. And as today we wake up to this analysis by Ember that really renewables have crossed coal. So it's exciting time, and we're transitioning. Doug, shortly thereafter, Coward started Solar and Energy Loan Fund, went to the Department of Energy and got a grant to start that. It is a CDFI, a Community Development Finance Institution. So some of the capital that they utilize to finance clean energy solutions, which energy efficiency, solar, and moving into battery storage. That some of those monies that they use to do the financing comes from historic, redlining and banks that have to put certain amount of money, and also from, pension funds and a lot of some of the earlier funders. And again, they're providing capital, which you're going to hear more about in a minute. Solar Energy Loan Fund self finances this. And I have often said that financing is the secret sauce, because what do the utilities have over everyone? They have the ability to build a power plant and put it on your bill, and you pay for it. And it is essentially a form of financing. And investor-owned utilities, which covers 75% of the state, get a guaranteed range of a rate of return on capital expenditures. So they're incentivized to build, and that could be transmission lines and power plants, and are less interested in helping people save money and use less energy. Our friends at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy rank utilities across the country 53. And in their most recent ranking, Florida Power and Light, for example, is 52 out of 53 in offering energy efficiency programs. And obviously, that's the back of the pack. And I always think you almost have to try to do that. Tampa Electric is 40 out of 53, and Duke Energy Florida is 47 out of 53. So if you capture all the cost-effective efficiency, you're going to use less energy by nature, because that's the very definition of energy efficiency, as well. So it's a real shame that we don't do that. And people right now, we are largely in an affordability crisis, which is groceries and housing and insurance, and it's also your electric bill. Florida Power and Light is in the midst of a rate increase. They asked for the biggest rate increase in American history at almost 10 billion. That's been negotiated down to about 7 billion in a settlement, and that's all still happening. In fact, there's hearings happening this week. So let's go to you, Mitch. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and talking about cleaner and cheaper power and how we're going to move the transition to clean energy. And one of the big pieces of that puzzle is the financing, and that's what Self does. So to you, Mitch. Mitch, you're on mute.
All right. Well,
There
thank you,
you go.
Susan. I appreciate it. Apologies there, but I was just introducing myself as the residential solar program manager at Self. I've been with Self for the last 2 years. And prior to that, I have a lot of industry insight, specifically for the residential solar side of things, because I used to be in consulting and working directly with homeowners and powering their homes and solarizing households. And so I'm excited to be able to share my experience as well as what I've been doing and involved with Self and in this clean energy transition with solar and storage, and excited to talk about it. Before we get into the clean energy transition side of things, just to kind of add to what Susan has already spoken about, really wanted to give a little bit more of an outline of Self and who Self is. So Self Solar and Energy Loan Fund is a real CDFI that's mission is to rebuild and empower underserved communities. And so do this by providing affordable financing solutions for different types of resilient sustainability property and home improvements. We do this also by improving the quality of life, health, and reducing carbon emissions. And so Self, established back in 2010, is really the first hybrid nonprofit green bank CDFI in the country. And like Susan's mentioned, started with a DOE grant, and since then have grown to not be reliant on government grants, but have a diverse capital stack to keep moving our this engine forward. And so just shows a testament. We've been in this for 15 years, and we're thriving. And on top of that, our focus really as a mission-driven lender is to focus on serving the low and moderate income homeowners. And in fact, 70% have been through loans that have been serving this LMI market. And we're extremely proud and of targeting that underserved community. And to date, Self has deployed 60 millions in loans, roughly over 4,000 green projects, leveraging about 100 plus million in total project costs. To dive a little bit deeper into the different types of loan programs Self offers, our, so to speak, bread and butter is our Green Home Loan Program, which these are unsecured loans for home improvement upgrades to single family and small multifamily properties. What's unique about us, we have our underwriting, which is based on the ability for the borrower to repay, not based on their credit score. The credit score does not tell the full story of the borrower, but rather examining what disposable income that may be available for that borrower, as well as their more recent credit history, paints a fuller picture of whether that borrower can repay that loan over time. And in addition to that, we do provide other types of loans as well. We have our SEER and SAGE programs, which are for landlords and novice developers. Typically these are affordable housing projects where we provide a construction loan for. And then we also have our solar department where we're providing residential and now more recently commercial loans, and for nonprofit organizations. And then we've got other specialty programs such as septic to sewer, and we have a huge contractor network that we vet to make sure that these contractors are a reliable source for the borrower who's taking out the loan, to ensure that, especially for solar, being at longer term loans, that the contractor is going to be in business. Moving forward, started here at the headquarters in Fort Pierce, Florida, but has now expanded to 17 states plus the District of Columbia. Our goal is to try to get the entire country looking like the color green here. We have 13 partners covering these 17 plus states, and these partners are other emerging green banks, CDFIs, who are trying to jumpstart getting into the green lending, consumer lending side of things. And they don't have their own capital. They don't have the infrastructure to underwrite the loans. And so they'll tap into what we call our plug and play program, where they'll be able to use our resources and be able to grow over time. And so we're happy to be able to partner with 13 other of these green banks and CDFIs, and looking to expand our partnership across the country. I'm going to switch over to getting into the clean energy transition. And so I'm really going to talk about, clean energy transition and how it can affect in different types of applications here. And so we have front of the meter applications, where this is large scale generation and storage that's connected directly to the transmission and distribution grid. So this would be your utility scale solar, and the type of solutions that they're providing, which is stabilizing wholesale energy prices and increasing grid reliability. Then I'm also going to be talking about what we're more familiar with, is the behind the meter applications. So this is your rooftop solar on homes, businesses, and nonprofits, and the type of solutions that these are able to provide, which is energy independence and energy security, not being reliant on the grid, and how it can be affordable. And so, there's a lot of questions right now with the narrative of pushing more for coal, oil, and gas, and the recent enactment of the One Big Beautiful Bill, and what this means for clean energy. And I'm going to be talking about how clean energy, the movement, is going to continue to press on, even with some of these tax incentives and subsidies going away. That came about from the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so I want to paint the big picture here of what's been the timeline here of solar and battery. And if we go back to 2010, and if you look at this chart shows a distribution, a different type of energy resources that were added to the grid. And the majority of those energy resources were fossil fuel resources, coal, natural gas. And you can see in 2010, about 3 to 4% was solar, and battery wasn't relevant really at all in 2010. And now if you fast forward to 2025, for the first half, like we've mentioned, 82% of all new electricity generating capacity has come from solar and battery. So this is a real testament of this clean energy movement. And a lot of why that's happening is because of the economies of scale. It is the cheapest source of energy. And we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that here in a few slides. But just wanted to paint that picture. And then a couple other fun facts here is that 7% of homes in the US have solar today. And by 2030, this number will grow to 12% of all US homes. So that's 1 out of 8 homes. And then another fun fact here is that, given with everything that's going on with the narrative to push for coal, oil, and gas, 77% of the new solar in 2025 has been built in red states. So I really want to now touch on a little bit of this, of why renewable energy is considered the cheapest source of energy. And from the front of the meter side of things, so we're talking about utility scale solar. So there was a study that was done by Lazard, which is a reputable investment advisory firm. They publish these reports every year. And it's basically a report on the levelized cost of energy. Essentially, what it means is what does it take for the minimum amount of electricity for the power plants to produce in order to cover all their costs through the lifespan of that power plant. And it's a great benchmark to kind of show and demonstrate what's considered a cost competitive power source. And so if we take a look to this green square over here, and you see utility scale solar, and you see it being compared to your natural gas power plant as well. And these are power plants that would be providing power for your base and intermediate loads. So these are your constant, mostly minimum electricity needed to provide loads during the day, your off-peak times. And utility scale solar to build out a new plant is much cheaper than you can see with the natural gas power plant. And what's even more surprising, these numbers that I'm demonstrating here, is for without tax subsidies, right? So when the tax subsidies go away, and this is for today, so utility scale will only get solar will only get cheaper and cheaper over time, is that it's already more cost competitive to build more utility scale solar than to build a new natural gas plant. And on top of that, there's an argument that, well, hey, the utility scale solar is an intermittent power source, meaning it relies on the sun. It's not reliable. It's not a dispatchable power source. Well, when you pair it with batteries, it is. And even when you pair it with batteries and you're using that as a reliable source to cover peak load demands versus a gas peaking plant, it's still much cheaper. And so this is a great study showing that. But at the same time, what's more powerful is an actual, storyline. And this is something that's happened in Texas. And so what you're seeing here to the right is if it is essentially two parts of a chart. The part to the left is July 2022. The part to the right is July 2025. What you see here is that back in July of 2022, the majority of the energy mix in Texas was fossil fuels. It was not solar generation. Solar generation made a very small percentage of it. And what you'll see with this red line is that during the peak times, which is between, in this case, 1 to 6 p.m., that this red line spikes, which means the wholesale electricity prices spiked. And what happens is that when you fast forward to July 2025 and you add much more renewable energy sources, you can see for the same average summer day in July that the wholesale electricity prices are now much more stable. And so essentially this difference has saved Texas a lot of money being spent on a day's worth of electricity. In fact, it's 1/10 of the wholesale electricity price. So instead of 516 million being spent for a day's energy, it's 51 million, and now also serving 8% more energy demand today. And so that's really showing a powerful example of how adding more renewable energy sources helps stabilize wholesale electricity prices and keeps them low even throughout peak times. And on top of that, ERCOT, which is the grid operator in Texas, has historically had to issue multiple conservation orders. And in 2025, no conservation orders had been issued during these Texas summer heat waves. So once again, just showing the value of grid reliance when you add in more renewable energy sources. So I'd like to now transition over from the front of the meter applications over to the behind the meter applications. So these, are rooftop solar ground mounts, solar canopies, these type of projects that that the property owner owns. And so before I dive into some examples that I have through South, I want to, paint this picture over here to the right of the average retail price of electricity. And this is the national average retail price of electricity. And this is from the EIA. And it shows that from 2000 to 2025, the national average, there has been a 126% increase over the 25-year period. And a lot of that has to do with, broken down to these four different categories, which is the fuel costs, where fossil fuel still generation still dominates, the grid infrastructure repairs and upgrades, where um, you know you have these rate increases because these aging grids need to be repaired and upgraded. But at the same time, you have these investor-owned utility companies squeezing in the shareholder profits to maintain that, to make sure that the shareholders are kept happy, and that also drives up the cost too. So you have all that. You have extreme weather events, and then rising demand is the big piece here, right? That we want to really focus on, is that this is the last 25 years. What will it look like the next 25 years, right? So what's happening in the future is that we're going to have a surge of new demand of electricity coming to our grid. And there was a report done by the Department of Energy this summer, the reports evaluating the U.S. grid reliability and security, and they outlined a worst case scenario where our annual outage hours today for grid interruption is in the single digits, or that could possibly increase to 800 plus hours by 2030. And they said the reason for this, that it could happen, is because of the rise in demand in AI data centers, EV adoption, home electrification, the increase in domestic manufacturing, and because we're retiring these fossil fuel plants, that we don't have enough new supply to outpace the retirement of these fossil fuel plants. And part of their solution is to delay the retirement of the fossil fuel plants. And they do that, that's only going to increase pricing much faster, because these plants were retiring for a reason, because they were inefficient. So, that's a little bit worrisome. And so, what are hopefully some other solutions, and hopefully, we can continue to provide more utility scale solar to the grid. But what's another solution here is what is called distributed energy resources. And these distributed energy resources, such as your rooftop solar, solar canopy, solar battery, EVs, can actually be part of a virtual power plant that can help strengthen the grid reliability during these peak demands, and serve as a way to, to provide additional power sources when needed. And a great example of this is in Puerto Rico, when Hurricane Maria hit back in 2017, devastated the area, and in fact, that was the longest blackout in U.S. history, where some residents did not get electricity back until 11 months later. And so there was a huge surge in buying, getting solar, getting battery into their homes, and they eventually created a virtual power plant program. And most recently, that was tested, that virtual power plant program, where there was a shortfall of 50 megawatts of electricity. And they dispatched 70,000 batteries from these homes to address that shortfall, and it avoided multiple power outages in Puerto Rico. So that just shows the value of virtual power plants, and I think virtual power plants are going to play a huge role in the future to help stabilize this grid and all this rising demand of electricity. And not only that, this rooftop solar, as we know, is a great way to provide backup power and long-term cost benefits for the property owner. And this kind of transitions over to some examples that I have here that we've done through SELF, and how this can be, owning a rooftop solar project can be a affordable solution, both the long-term and also provide resilience as well for the people involved. And so in this case, and back in 2021, Gibson Plaza, which is an affordable senior housing facility owned by Miami-Dade, they were housing 90 plus low income and elderly residents that all lived in a hurricane zone, and needed a way to provide more energy security in the event of hurricanes. And so SELF with the partnership of the Leon Lowenstein Foundation, were able to raise $2,000 in grants to cover a solar and battery rooftop solar system for this facility. You know, and so what that was able to do is it able to, you know, leverage an additional grant money from the county as well to provide a new roof, which made the building solar ready. And through that, you know, savings benefits came about. And, you know, although the solar was meant to power common areas of the facility, it was able to offset $10,000 of annual energy savings, which is a lifetime cost of over $250,000. And then also, more importantly, reduce life-threatening situations because now this facility has backup power for weeks to support critical, sensitive medical equipment and refrigerated medicine, providing elevator access, lighting and communication. And so this just demonstrates the power of what's able to be done with a behind the meter rooftop solar project. And lastly, I want to show here is that this solar and storage system has a lot of benefits over a fossil fuel backup generator. One being when you combine solar and battery together, over time, that energy savings will pay itself back for the, you know, from the batteries, right? So now the batteries are essentially over time being paid off. And then on top of that, the operating costs are kept low with batteries. There's no fuel involved, it's minimal maintenance. And then also, you don't have to refill your battery. Your battery is an electric source. And so in an event of a hurricane, if you need to refill your generator, you can run into supply shortages. And this could be an issue with providing backup power for several days. And so just shows a good example of, you know, how rooftop solar and battery, it can be a useful measure here. And one last thing I want to show is that, you know, with this type of setup was able to offset 2,091 tons of CO2 lifetime. Another example here, I wanted to now switch over from away from a grant to now a actual project that requires a loan, right? So if a grant's not available, you know, what do the benefits look like economically when you need to use a loan? And so this is one of our more recent examples of a project that we're working with that has been pre-qualified but looking to close here soon. It's a nonprofit historic community theater. This project cost was $93,000. What's important here is that making sure that the cost of the project has a competitive price per watt. So typically for commercial projects, you want to look at $2 to $2.50 price per watt. And it's going to offset 76% of the facility's power. So it's going to take its $1,200 power bill and reduce it to around a $300 power bill. And so what you see here is that this particular facility, because it's a nonprofit, will be able to take advantage of direct pay, which is 30% of the project costs, as well as this facility resides in a low income community, you take another 10%. And if they apply that back to the loan, what you'll see is that they'll be cash flow positive in year 2 with a 10-year loan. And then by year 13, they have paid back all the payments for the loan, and in 25 years, they have generated over $300,000 in savings. And so just shows that even without a grant, that, you know, going solar and, you know, and being positioned in the right way can be a very valuable and affordable thing. And then what you see here to the right is essentially, you know, when the tax credits go away, because they will be going away after 2027 for commercial projects, nonprofit facilities, still demonstrates that even after 25 years, they're saving it still a considerable amount of money. Now for that facility to be cash flow positive might take longer. In this case, it takes to 11 years, but you can help shorten that time period of that facility being cash flow by extending that loan term from 10 to 20 to 25 years. And we know battery costs and panels are just going to get cheaper in the next couple of years. And so we should be able to see it still being an affordable project, or a similar project like this could be affordable even 2 to 3 years down the road when subsidies or when tax credits are not going to be around. A couple of other examples that I have here. This is for single family homes. We have a North Carolina rural resident who was affected by the Hurricane Helene, needed a new roof, was worried because during Hurricane Helene had 3 weeks of no power. And it was important that because they live out in the country and they have access to a water well, that they need power to be able to have access to that water well. And so now going with the solar system, they feel much more secured. And just this average size solar system plans to avoid 209 tons of CO2, which is equivalent to over 400,000 miles driven by gas powered vehicles. And so, once again, just one house with the rooftop solar, being able to offset that CO2, being able to provide reliable power is a great setup for that homeowner. And then lastly, we have one right here is a Florida resident who wanted to be completely energy independent, got a whole home backup system. The roof was not feasible, needed a ground mount. This solar system was finished in about a month. So really fast turnaround to get to the system completion. And he took his power bill from $242 a month to a minimum of $27 a month. His lifetime cost savings with the ITC credits, $41,000. But even without it, he still benefits with energy security and cost savings over the life of the panels when he added a whole home backup and a ground mount, right? So just kind of shows the affordability even when you're having to get a ground mount solar system. I'd like to now move to talking about a little bit about energy efficiency upgrades and how you can really maximize your energy savings with these retrofits and appliances. And so a good rule of thumb here is that if there's an older home pre-built from 2000, it's always important to perform an energy audit to determine what kind of energy leakage that may be occurring in that home. Because when you add light and medium efficiency retrofits that have a low initial cost, it actually is a better combination than trying to use additional solar panels to offset a leaky home. And so when you combine these light, medium efficiency retrofits, which can together combine to 25 to 30% annual energy savings, and then you wait 6 to 12 months to size your solar system, that's going to add extra value when going solar. And in fact, if you need a little bit more of an AC unit or a hybrid water heater or variable speed pump to help reduce your energy consumption, those payback periods are going to be faster than putting a rooftop solar. So sometimes it's good to get those types of energy appliances upgraded before going with rooftop solar. So if you can reduce your consumption and then apply the panels that you need, that's going to add the best value as far as going forward in the future. And so to top things off here with energy efficient upgrades is that there are actually a lot of great rebates and incentives that are here to help kind of reduce payback periods and reduce the costs. We still have that federal tax credit till the end of the year. We have utility rebate programs, but more importantly, assuming that the following two rebates, the here and the homes rebates, do not go away. Right now, they're being reviewed pending DOE review. This is due to the One Big Beautiful Bill. These rebates prior to the One Big Beautiful Bill were scheduled to be issued out later this year or next year. But if they do come about, it's going to provide real big significant cost savings for LMI households. Some high efficiency appliances up to $14,000 or whole house retrofits can be $4,000 to $8,000. And so Obviously there's caps for certain things, but if those rebates do become available, that's going to help really make getting these energy efficiency components inside the home a really good way to help reduce that energy consumption before deciding to put rooftop solar. And some other additional takeaways as I come near the end here. We really don't want to forget about, as we move into this clean energy transition, the low income and underserved communities, because they are the most energy burden group, right? So 25% of low income households spend over 15% of their income on energy bills, which comparatively to the national average, that's 2.9%. That's quite a big difference. And so they're typically historically left behind by mainstream finance. And so as a CDFI, we really focus that 70% of our loans do help homeowners, be able to provide access to these home improvement upgrades with affordable financing. And so we need other community lenders to also help make their homes solar ready, so that with new roofs, electrical panel upgrades, so that when that rooftop solar is applied, it doesn't create major issues down the road. And then if the home is ready, considered solar ready, power purchase agreements, leasing programs. Now, we don't have power purchase agreements here in Florida, but in other states we do. These are going to be very popular options going forward when the residential tax credit ends, because they can provide 1 year savings for the low income households, right? So going to be a way to go solar and still make it affordable year one for the LMI community. And then there is a $7 billion solar program that, if you haven't heard in the news, Self was an awardee for 156 million of it. Unfortunately, that EPA has issued terminations from it, once again due to the One Big Beautiful Bill. Although they're trying to unlawfully claw back these funds that were congressionally obligated to us, some awardees will be fighting and contesting, and there could be a hope that the program does get restored in the future. And if it does, would be an amazing program to help rooftop solar become super affordable and accessible to 900,000 households with grants and deep subsidies. And so we'll see what happens there. And then obviously, as I have personally seen with a lot of our solar loans, is they're attached with batteries more and more so. In fact, 60% of all our solar loans have batteries attached to them now. That's just going to be a more necessary item in the home, and will play a pivotal role in ensuring the homes are resilient. And we can expect to see battery costs come down and see more batteries paired with solar in homes. And last thing I want to talk about is the power of collaborations. Federal funding is going to be limited, but more than ever, CDFIs and green banks need to continue to be clean energy advocates and continue to find creative solutions for working with forward-looking traditional banks, investment firms, utilities, local and state governments. How can we continue to provide ways to raise philanthropic investments, public funds, provide gap funding, loan loss reserves, so we can mobilize private capital and continue this clean energy movement, is going to be, I think, key. And really finding ways to be creative about doing that is going to be beneficial for everybody in the community. And I'd like to kind of end with this. I found this online. I don't remember who quoted this, but I thought this was really painting a picture of what's really going on with renewable energy today. It's essentially, the quote is, renewable energy is crushing in the real economy, but losing in the attention economy. So basically what this means is that, there's a lot of the loudest voices right now are really clinging to 20th century solutions. And, the narrative out there is oil, gas, and coal, and that's all we hear. But what's happening quietly behind the scenes is that renewable energy continues to win over and over again, because at the end of the day, the market is driven by outcome, and that outcome is what is the what works best, and renewable energy is the cheapest and the fastest and the cleanest to deploy, and it's a $70 billion economic force, and so it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to be here, and that's my presentation that I have for today.
Mitch, thank you so much. This is why I really wanted to see this session happen so we could talk about this because and you've described a lot of this, but at the federal level, there's been a pulling back of the support for this clean energy transition. I would say myself, my opinion is it's not wise for a whole lot of reasons, but here we are, and so I wanted to help people understand that there are ways to keep moving these things forward, even if the federal government has sort of another agenda. The biggest utility in Florida is Florida Power and Light, and their parent company, NextEra. The CEO, John Ketchum, recently in June was at a Politico Energy Summit, and he said the growing demand for energy is overarching everything. And you mentioned this already, Mitch, with the data centers and so forth, take up so much energy. And then he said, with the obstacles to gas, so getting turbines and the tariffs, again, which are policies coming out of this federal administration, it's up to 7 years to bring a gas plant online. So this idea of it's interesting because they used to always say gas was the bridge to the future. Now they're saying renewables is the bridge to the future, which they may be betting on gas, but we need that because you cannot bring enough gas power plants online. And then he went on to say, and when gas does show up in 2032, it's going to be 3 times as expensive as it is now. So it's just cheaper. And one of the things, as you were laying out, just sort of self's history. At the beginning, really self only financed energy efficiency. And you made such great points about the fact that you don't put solar on an inefficient building. So you want to do the cheap stuff first, right, with the lowest paybacks. It's interesting. One of the things that Florida does policy wise, when every 5 years Florida sets conservation goals. It's called FECA, the Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. And I was referring to earlier ACEEE, American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, is their rankings. We're really at the back of the pack. Well, the first thing that they do is they deploy a 2 year payback screen. So there's a proceeding before the Florida Public Service Commission, and they eliminate all the cheap stuff. So you were talking about that, Mitch. And again, this is in this every 5 year. So that's the lion's share of successful states that run, really good energy efficiency and conservation programs. Florida eliminates from the conversation, like before we even get started. And they also deploy an economic benefit screen called the rate impact measure. Well, by definition, if you're going to get more efficient, you're going to impact rates. So, like, we're the only state that uses the rate impact measure. So, naturally, measures that are going to reduce, your power needs and your energy bill are going to impact rates. So, it's a very kind of contrived process because, again, the big utilities don't want to sell less energy, and if they capture all the cost-effective efficiency, it makes it harder for them to argue to build new power plants, which is how your bill goes up. So again, at the beginning, self was really just doing efficiency, and you did such a wonderful job kind of laying out the costs and where that's gone. Now solar's cheaper and getting cheaper all the time. And, it's really a volume, kind of buying situation. So the more solar's out there, the cheaper that's all, going to get. But I wanted to just mention that, self really started with energy efficiency. I also think of self as a job creation engine because there's so many roofing companies and AC companies that have been able to grow their business. In fact, my husband and I are in a new home, and we had some roofing contractors come out, And one of the roofing contractors literally had in their, signature on their email, a contact for Self, because Self comes in. I mean, so many people, you might need a new roof or a new air conditioner. And I'll get back to your point about how just a high efficiency air conditioner can reduce your energy bill as well. But not everybody's going to have the whatever it is, 5, 10, or even for a new roof could be 20 or $30,000. So I'm just everyone, who's listening to this, this is a resource. Elected officials, and Self has just developed a local government resource kit. Again, it doesn't obligate anybody to anything, but if you need a new roof and you don't have that money, you need financing. And I am so proud to be on the board of Self, because we're really helping people in their daily lives. And when the two things you mentioned, Mitch, that the loans are unsecured. So in other settings, and it's terrible because there are some unscrupulous people out there that will take advantage. And if you have a secured loan or you're not really getting a good price, Self acts almost like your big brother, in the good sense of the word, that looks over an estimate that you might get, because not everybody knows all the ins and outs. We also can get help from our friends at Solar United Neighbors, who will look over, estimates and quotes for solar. So it's really terrific that Self is that resource to make sure that you're getting, a good deal. And so you're not underwater. So the fact that it's an unsecured loan, no one is ever going to lose their home. And there are other kinds of loans where that possibly could happen. So I wanted to make that point again, unsecured loans, and then the ability to pay. It's not about credit, it is about your ability to pay. And that's why the figure you mentioned is about 70% of the loans that Self does are in low to moderate income communities. So again, super personally proud about that. They also tap into, people may be familiar with a nonprofit called Kiva, Kiva.org. And if there is someone who, and you'll find, maybe someone who was newly, widowed, or a situation that they can't, whatever, qualify for one of the loans, they will put them up on Kiva, which is a crowd funding, site. They've been around for more than a decade, and it just warms my heart. Self has created sort of Kiva teams. You go in and again, you're crowdfunding, and sometimes it's a matter of just hours for someone to get their roof funded. And so that's exciting. You should check out Kiva. And then the last thing I wanted to say, and you're welcome to put questions in the chat. My colleague Alika is monitoring that, and we're happy to have questions. I love the informal discussion. But the main reason that clean energy is cheaper is because you're eliminating the fuel costs. And as John Ketchum from NextEra said, in 2032, when gas plants, new ones are starting to come online, it's going to be 3 times as expensive. So those payback figures that you laid out are going to become more and more attractive and more appealing, because it's that gas is just getting more expensive. So renewables eliminate the gas price, right? And that's gas is very volatile. It has historically gone up. It, surged when Russia attacked Ukraine, and, there can be different dynamics. There's also increasing competition for, just on the demand side. In the last 15 years in the United States, we're building a liquefied natural gas industry, LNG, and there's a lot of plans to export that to Europe, which sounds like a very polluting thing to do, in my book, but it's going to get more competitive for this gas. So gas prices are going to go up. That data centers, this was mentioned earlier. So I think that's really important. And next week, RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute, will be releasing a report, an analysis of a proposal that the Jacksonville utility did. And I'm going to keep, that largely under wraps. But the 2023 figures in the integrated plan for JEA, um, in their own numbers, their 2025 figures are increased by 139%. So they estimated in 2023 their costs in their integrated plan, known as an IRP, and then just their own numbers in 2025 are up 139%. So we're going to see more and more, of that with costs going up. So it's gonna continue to make sense. And I do think, again, with people watching, and you mentioned, Mitch, the talk about coal and oil and gas and bringing coal back, and, which is largely not going to happen because it's not economic. And utilities, for their part, they need certainty. They need to plan. They don't plan for a year or two. They plan for a decade or more. So it's really important to kind of get these consistencies. And the last thing, the slide that you put up, was Solar for All, and then Florida was going to get $347 million in those energy efficiency rebates that you mentioned, Homes and HERA. It's just a shame because that's about reducing energy waste. And to me, it's as conservative as a position as one could take is to get the cleanest, cheapest, fastest product. And, true conservatives value free market and competition. So the idea that we would lock in coal or lock in gas when there is a less expensive alternative that keeps energy dollars here at home, right? And creates local jobs. Florida sends about $70 billion out of state each year to bring in fuel from elsewhere. So you imagine that local economic development if you're keeping those energy dollars here at home. So Mitch, I'll just you know, I don't know. You've laid out so many things. What I really love is seeing the expansion of what Self's doing with these commercial projects. You mentioned something about the nonprofits, which could be houses of worship. That's got a I just wanted you to clarify. There's a whole nother year for those tax credits on commercial projects versus the residential. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I can kind of do a quick outline. So when it comes to the residential tax credits, those are ending at the end of this year. And so when it comes to the commercial tax credits, you have up till 2027 to get that system PTO'd. And if you get that system under construction by uh, before the 4th of July of 2026, then you have 4 years to get that system PTO'd. And so, that's for the commercial. But one other thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't apply to batteries when it comes to commercial. Batteries actually are going to be sticking around till 2032, and then they start to phase out. And so, once again, as battery cost technology starts to continue to go down, and then you still have the battery tax credit, and then the need because of extreme climate events to have backup power, you'll see a lot more battery attachment rates with these solar systems. And in fact, you'll probably see very, very few solar systems by itself in the future.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And, it seems almost ironic, but these extreme weather events that are becoming more intense as our waters warm, right? We have more intense storms. And, so the need for the backup resilience, with batteries is growing. And, as it gets hotter and there's more extreme heat, which we're continually seeing, people then need to run their air conditioners more, which again is another reason to get a high efficiency air conditioner, which can reduce your bill by even a third. So super important. I think too, there's a lot of education needed in the communities about the role that financing can play. And I think there are some communities that are less, just sort of historically used to accessing bank financing, right? So here's financing for people who might only get credit, with a very super high interest, credit card, right? So this is affordable financing aimed. So like we most often put a mortgage on our house, right? Not that many people are going to buy, their home with a check, right? And write it for cash or your car. Right? People are very familiar for having an auto loan and paying it off over time. So it's a thinking, like a mindset, that people understand that you're paying off that high efficiency air conditioner over time, and or the solar system, or all of it, the duct work, and to get more efficient. So I think we're going to see people, more and more wanting to do that, particularly because the bills are going up. Our electric bills just keep going up. The Duke and Tampa Electric are coming in for additional rate increases. It's a little complicated, but they held off on part of their previous rate increase, so that's going to kind of happen with more of an automatic. But then they're going to be filing a new rate increase. I already mentioned Florida Power and Light from 2021 to 2023 in their main territory. Their bills went up about 51%, but up in the Panhandle where they bought Gulf Power, it was 64%. So, and then they came in for a billion two in storm costs, right? Again, we're having more extreme weather events, and that costs us all money. And then Florida Power and Light's now at the table for another. They asked initially for 10 billion. The number on the table is about 7 billion. So your bill's going to go up again. So that's just more motivation to use financing. It needs to be affordable, and you need to have the system sized right. And if you can, do all that energy efficiency upgrades first. So we only have just a few minutes left. Mitch, any other thoughts that you had? Um,
Yeah, no, just to double down on what you mentioned about, self and other CDFIs and green banks. We are really the clean energy advocates here, to be able to kind of provide that kind of gap funding and de-risk projects so that private capital investments can come in and provide those longer term loans. And so, and make it really affordable here in the future for, a lot of commercial projects. And so, that's number one. And number two, long-term solar has a lot of benefits, as you can see. You can save a lot of money, but if you don't have a long enough loan, um, and you're have an LMI household who really relies on, not having a bill that's going to be more expensive than their electricity bill, and need year one savings, finding opportunities there to really target the LMI households can be challenging, but there's ways to work together to raise grants, to raise low cost capital. There's a model in Georgia, where Montgomery Green Bank, who receives funding from the county, is able to work with a traditional bank like Climate First Bank, provide a 30-year loan, subsidize the first 10 years of the interest rates to make that monthly payment lower than their electricity costs for LMI households. And so a model like that, where we can kind of work together, collaborate, can be powerful. And, I think there's a lot of exciting things in the future. Just because the federal funds are limited, it's not going to stop the different resources that are available. And the great thing about solar is that you could be really creative and really, make things pencil out,
yeah.
with creative solutions.
Yeah, no, it's really great. So, I'm a glasses half full person. So the question on the table is, what can we do? And self is, going to be a big piece of that puzzle. So feel free to reach out to me, to reach out to Mitch. Go on to the Solar Energy Loan Fund's website, and we're all easy to find. So with that, it's almost 1 o'clock. So I'm going to wrap up and thank everybody for their kind attention. And thank you, Mitch.
My pleasure.